and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. I hope that everyone had a fantastic, radical, Marxist, communist, domestic terrorist day. It's true, my friends. Labor Day really isn't about our celebrating how hard we work. Rather, it's all about labor unions and the radical domestic Marxist that pushed Congress to declare it a national holiday. So, Ken, welcome back to the program, by the way. I've missed you. Glad you decided to come back to work.
Oh, sweet. I got to find the right buttons here. Did you move all the buttons when you were in Jackson?
I did. Yeah, I haven't been in here, but, you know.
Well, I found them. You can't keep me at it for long. I do know how to push buttons, right?
That's true. It's true. So how was your communist, Marxist, radical domestic terrorist day?
I was completely removed from the same. I have a project in another city that I was working on, and I spent pretty much 3 days away from the internet.
Oh, look at you.
And yeah, it was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I spent a couple of days away myself. I thought when my phone finally hit service, that the world had come to an end, and it always happens that way. There's up by our cabin, there's only one spot where you can make a phone call or get check your email or whatever, and every time you hit that spot, it's like the phone is going to melt down, as if the world would come to an end if we're all not connected all the time.
But you didn't get any messages from me, did you?
I did not.
Yeah.
It was kind of refreshing. Anyway, welcome back to the program. It's we do okay without you, but I'd rather have you here. So the layout for the program this week, I think we're going to be in this studio all this week. It'll be refreshing that I'm not bouncing all over the place. In the People's Republic of Jackson, or at the original studio, or here. So it'll be nice to get a whole weekend.
I did notice, and I wouldn't really count it against your 99% right now, but at one point you're sitting in Jackson, you say, broadcasting to you from the studios in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Yeah, well, it's...
well, maybe the theory was we were actually broadcasting from here. Now,
yeah, I don't know what was going on there. The struggle is real when you're in the People's Republic.
It is true, and I want to commend you for your courage to go into there and to come out apparently relatively unscathed. I didn't see you carrying a pride flag when you came.
No, that doesn't happen. But it is kind of a harrowing journey, getting there and getting back. So anyway, welcome back to the program. On the show this week, tomorrow, we're going to have an interview with Peter Cousins. This is going to be something completely different. He's got a new book out about Deadwood. And it's I read a lot of it over the weekend. It's an interesting read. It's one of those history books that it doesn't feel like you're reading a textbook. It's more written in sort of narrative form. So we're going to talk to Peter Cousins tomorrow on the program and find out what exactly he learned about Wild Bill Hickok. One of the more interesting things that I guess I didn't know is that by the time Hickok had made it to Cheyenne, and he had some stop-ins and spats where he was a marshal in different places, and that things kind of went bad for him in Abilene, Texas, and so he made his way to Cheyenne, and by that time, and I didn't know this, Ken, but his eyesight had started to fail him, and by the time he got to Deadwood, he was almost blind at night. Even so, he was still probably the best shot in Deadwood, and not quick enough to escape Jack McCall. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to talk to the author of that book. It should be an interesting and entertaining interview. So we're going to do that tomorrow about 9 o'clock. So you don't want to miss it. It's going to be a great discussion, I think. But on today's program, John Barrasso says that the Senate is going to roll over Democrats with a rule change to confirm Trump's nominees. Now, I think I told you, maybe it was last week, maybe the week before, that I spoke with the Cynthia Lummis's campaign manager, and he told me that the Democrats are just obstructing everything they can, that it doesn't matter what it is, who it is. They're just, if it has Trump's name anywhere in its orbit, they're going to object to it. And the example he gave is you may have somebody who's been an ambassador to 5 different countries and performed admirably at all of those posts. And the Democrats would oppose that nominee just because Trump said, hey, he's done such a good job for the last 5 terms. Why don't we put him in the same boat? Nope. The Democrats have to object. Well, John Barrasso, who is the majority whip, he says the GOP, and this is from Fox News, by the way, is going to change the Senate rules unilaterally if the Democrats don't cooperate on 145 pending appointees. Now, think about that. We're over 200 days into Trump's second administration, and there are still 145 posts that are vacant right now that the Democrats are just objecting to. But here's what Fox says, quote, Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso is ready to go nuclear, not nuclear waste, as some people in Wyoming are doing, but to go nuclear on Senate Democrats and their blockade of President Donald Trump's nominees. Before leaving Washington, D.C. to their respective home states, Senate Republicans were on the verge of a deal with their colleagues across the aisle to hammer out a deal to ram through dozens of Trump's picks for non-controversial positions. So that's, the example that I used, the guy that's been an ambassador in 5 different countries, them obstructing that appointment. So they're just non-controversial people, not super political posts, but just because it has Trump's name attached to it, well, the Democrats can't have any of that. But those talks fell apart when Trump nuked any further negotiations over funding demands from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Currently, there are 145 pending nominations on the Senate's executive calendar, with that number expected to balloon when the upper chamber reopens for business. Lawmakers are set to return on Tuesday, so that would be today, and John Barrasso wants to immediately tackle the nomination quandary. He's engaged in a public pressure campaign, writing an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, which was not sent to Cowboy state politics. Big shocker there. Meanwhile, he's facilitated talks among Senate Republicans on the best path forward and told Fox News Digital in an interview that at this point, he's willing to do anything necessary to see the president's picks confirmed. Now, the reason I picked this article is, well, it's kind of newsy, but second is that you remember when dingy Harry Reid changed the rules in the Senate to ram through Supreme Court justices where you don't have to have a cloture of 60 votes in the Senate. And he thought, well, he would just bypass the Republicans altogether and they could put Barack Obama's picks on the Supreme Court. Well, when Donald Trump was in office, that strategy, and dingy Harry Reid was no longer in the Senate, that whole strategy kind of backfired on him. And now the Senate can ram through a Supreme Court nominee, and so what if the Democrats are objecting? As long as you've got a majority, you're good to go. Now, it's interesting to me that historically nominees go through with very little controversy. That we can all agree, okay, this person's a good choice for this job, and we really shouldn't object to it for a couple of reasons. One, they're probably qualified, but two, the executive should be able to appoint the people that they want in office, whether or not we agree with who those people are. They won the election. Either the governor or the president, they're the ones that won. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they get to make the choices. And there are a slew of boards that the executive gets. I mean, the president, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of positions that he gets to make the choice of. And similarly, at the state level, there's probably hundreds of positions that the Wyoming governor gets to, and all governors for that matter, that they get to appoint. But I question the wisdom of changing the rules of the Senate to benefit one's own party. Those rules are there for a very specific reason. And the biggest one of those is to protect the minority.
That's a good point. We run into the same thing with all of this gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering, yes.
Yeah. But the thing to keep in mind there, of course, is for years that's been done by the other side, and things are very much in their favor. But we see that even in the Wyoming House, we have to make rules and changes. And it's really easy to think, man, if we had this rule this way, we could do that and not think about it coming back and biting you when the pendulum swings the other way.
Well, one of the biggest ones, and I think this is a great example, that and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ken, but every general session, no, it's every budget session, I think. No, I'm wrong again. It's every general session that Redcoat former Speaker of the House, Steve Harshman, tries to change the 2/3 vote during the budget session. See, in Wyoming and the budget session that we are getting ready to go into, anything that is not directly budget related has to have a 2/3 vote for it to be heard on the floor. And the reason for that is Wyoming's legislative calendars are so short that you don't want to really gum up the works with a bunch of extraneous bills. So we have roughly a 2-month session 1 year, and then we have a 1-month session the next year. And it's all worked off working days. One is 40 working days, the other one is 20. Well, during the short one, the budget session, if a bill is not directly related to the budget, it has to have a 2/3 vote to be heard on the floor. And of course, the reason for that is simple, right? You want to focus on the budget, and that's it. Well, Harshman has tried. God, I should go back and see how many times he has tried to remove that rule so that any bill could be brought during the budget session. Well, the reason it's there is so that the people who are in the minority, and in last budget session, the Republicans or the conservatives used this rule over and over and over, and I guess the previous session too, to kill any piece of legislation they want because they had one vote more than a third. Ken, I thought you were going to weigh in. I mean, are you out of practice? Well, you must
No,
be.
I'm not out of practice, and I gesticulated wildly or mildly.
Mildly, yes.
Letting you know that I didn't have anything. I was contemplating something, and so I pulled the microphone down.
That's
I
usually my
want
cue.
to do, and that's a cue. But as you looked at me, go ahead and carry on. So.
See, well, I mean, I didn't want to.
We spend a week apart, and it's just like
it's like learning all over again.
Yeah.
It's like that first motorcycle ride after a long winter, and you still know how to ride a bike, and it's still true, the old phrase, it's just like riding a bike, but sometimes you're still a little bit wobbly, and that's what we're experiencing this morning.
Well, that's why I gave up golf.
Yeah,
because unless that's your life,
well,
it's gonna suck.
I heard that you shot a 77 one trip.
Actually, I think it was 75 or 76, but the back nine was not near as good.
Well, anyway, so the rules that exist, whether they're in the Wyoming legislature or or Congress, they are there to protect the minority, and that is, if you're not majority, if you're not among the Republicans, you still deserve a voice in Congress, and those rules are there to protect that voice, however burdensome they might be for the folks that are in control. But let's see here. Barrasso says that he wants to change the rule. He's willing to do just about anything. Let me just tell you how this whole thing ends up here. Quote, when you take a look at things right now, and this is quoting from the article, it takes a 30-minute roll call vote to get on cloture, and then 2 hours of debate time, and then another 30-minute roll call vote, Barrasso said. Well, that's 3 hours, and it's time when you can't do legislation. You can't do anything else. But there is a menu of key items that Congress will have to deal with when they return, particularly the deadline to fund the government by September 30th. Barrasso acknowledged that reality and noted that it is because of a hefty schedule, and he wanted the rules changed to wanted to put it front and center. There's not going to be any time to. There's not going to be limited time, I should say, to actually get people through the nominations process, which is going to drag on further, and you'll have more people having hearings and coming out of committees. He said this backlog is going to worsen with. Okay, so anyway, he just wants to change the rules to be able to move these nominees forward, and I think it's a really bad idea. And while it may be expedient, and it may benefit the president, and it would do away with the Democrats' obstruction. I think it's a really bad idea. I was not in favor of dingy Harry Reid doing away with the cloture vote for the Supreme Court. I'm not in favor of the Democrats' desire to do away with the filibuster. That's another rule that protects the minority. And I'm not in favor of changing this rule. And the truth is, and maybe you can elaborate on some rules that in the Wyoming legislature that might need to be changed. But I'm not really in favor of changing those either.
It's interesting sitting on this side how many agencies are resistant to whatever new laws do come up.
Mm-hmm.
I think 6 or 8 different school districts around the country have completely ignored the rules that we've made to free up homeschoolers.
Yeah.
And they're still sending letters saying you have to register, you have to tell us what to do. Entirely not true. Another rule that we put out would have to do with DEI.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that one next.
Okay, yeah, it just seems to me like we don't want to talk about that. We think if we just kind of lay low, we can go ahead and have business as usual, and eventually this Freedom Caucus phase will be over and we'll be back to normal. They have what we're calling it Freedom Caucus derangement syndrome.
Well, it pretty much is.
It is.
Like everywhere you look in the media, they throw in the word Freedom Caucus, even in places where it doesn't really apply. And the whole point, the whole reason for it is to make you think that they're the bad guys, when in reality, it really is the redcoats that are gumming up a lot of this work. And we're going to talk about one of those here in just a second. You're going to love this one.
We're getting slammed all around there about taxes, local taxes. We cut the property taxes, so cities and counties, and they're blaming all that on the Freedom Caucus, and we don't need any more tax cuts because et cetera. What gets left out of the story is that it was the Freedom Caucus that fought tooth and nail to backfill that, so that it wasn't the cities and counties governments, which didn't have a choice in the matter. It wasn't them that had to make up the difference. We were willing, and we had it mapped out to backfill that on a statewide level so that we would take the brunt of our own decisions, and the counties, the cities wouldn't be able to turn around and point a finger at us and say, you guys ruined our life. But that is not the story that gets out, and it gets very
well. You've mentioned a couple of different things there. And there are a lot. There's a lot of bullcrap arguments that are floating around this whole property tax thing. But the opposition that you're seeing in the media comes from agencies. It comes from, agencies and local governments. Oh, how dare you cut our funding?
County Commissioners Association.
Yeah, the County Commissioners Association. We just can't exist. County commissions, counties, cities, we just can't exist with all this money. And there's no recognition that perhaps they're taxing too much. And if you have towns that have 3 and 4 years worth of operating funds in reserve, at some point we've got to say, when is enough? How much money do you need in the bank to operate? When can we have the conversation that you've taxed the bejesus out of people and you need to lay off?
There's another bill coming up that we're working on, which would allow municipalities and counties to be able to expand their investment opportunities where they can invest in different ways to save even more. And that's exactly the question I asked on that one, is when is enough enough? I mean, if you got to save for a fire truck or something, sure, I understand that.
Sure, fire districts,
Yeah.
you have to have a lot
Yeah,
of money.
things like
Fighting
that.
a fire is expensive.
But it's become a thing now for government to get into the investing business.
Well, let me ask you a question, Ken. Now, you're a state legislator. I'm assuming that you have some idea of how county commissions work, but riddle me this, riddle me that. If you're charging somebody property taxes, and let's just say the property tax bill is kind of steep in comparison to other areas of the county, would you say that those folks that pay those high property taxes ought to be able to benefit from the public services that go along with those property taxes? Do you think that would be a fair trade?
Oh, come now.
I mean, I think so, right?
Do you know what that would cost the counties to be able to set up that infrastructure?
Yeah, well, here's the problem, that there are areas in this state where homeowners are being charged a ridiculous amount of money, far and above more than even a house in town. And yet they don't receive any of those services. And I'll give you a classic example. Now, Ken, let's say you have a house and it's a nice house and it's in a nice area of the county and you're paying property taxes, but 7 months out of the year, perhaps 8 or 9 months out of the year, you can't access it because the road hasn't been plowed. I mean, do you think that's fair? That you're being charged property taxes on a home that you can't even access, and yet the county is able to benefit from those high property taxes. And in some places in Wyoming, and not all counties, but I mean, these are just select places where there are, we'll just call them very desirable recreation properties, that perhaps counties are using those areas as a cash cow and not providing services that those property taxes would necessitate. Now, don't tell me that we're not charging enough in property taxes, and don't tell me that counties are being hurt by a reduction in property taxes. Now, are there a few of them? Yeah. But the hit that they are taking is nowhere near what the media is making it out to be. And I am sick to death of this argument that, well, everybody else around us, they pay higher property taxes than we do, so you should just shut up and take it. Bull crap.
Maybe if the rich actually paid their fair share.
Yeah, we need to tax the rich. Yes.
I'm so tired of that argument as well. They're the only
off.
ones that are actually. It's getting really warm in here. Maybe we should take a break before we go to DEI.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Oh, yeah. So get this. You'll love this one. Talk about people that aren't paying attention to laws. The Wyoming Department of Health. They seem to have gotten a letter from the Administration for Children and Families. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you how these folks, they're just kind of ignoring the law, and they're doing it because they think you won't notice. You're going to love this crap. We'll do it in just a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday. And I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. And I'm also right about the Department of Health, the Wyoming Department of Health, trying to screw you over. See, some of these agencies, they've got bureaucrats in place and that have been there for so long, they think that they can just wait it out and that they don't have to pay attention to the law and they can just keep doing what they're doing. Well, on Tuesday, August 26th, a letter was drafted from the Administration for Children and Families and sent to the Wyoming Department of Health. Let me just read you the opening paragraphs here, and then we'll talk about it. And I quote, "Dear Mrs. Johansson, on April 14th, 2025, the Administration for Children and Families requested that Wyoming provide current curricula and programmatic materials in use or in any way relevant to your state, quote, Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP grant, for a medical accuracy review in accordance with the terms and conditions of this grant. We appreciate your timely response. While preparing your Wyoming's PREP content for the medical accuracy review, we identified content in the curricula and other program materials that fall outside of the scope of PREP's authorizing statute of 42 U.S.C. 713. Specifically, the following subjects and language are outside the scope authorized by statute, and they must be removed from the curricula. And here's just a couple of examples here. Making Proud Choices, the 5th edition facilitator manual, page 36. Asking participants to tell you their pronouns in a way of creating a safe space for transgender and gender nonconforming youth. Reinforce that sharing pronouns is optional. Some youth may not feel comfortable. So, riddle me this, riddle me that. I thought that this whole transgender focus on pronouns BS was specifically excluded from the Department of Education via new Wyoming statute. No, and I'm just spitballing here, but perhaps on page 39 and 40, when it says respect diversity, let's keep in mind that there's a diversity in society and in the group. Individuals come from different family backgrounds, different racial and cultural groups, and different living situations. Some young people already had romantic relationships. Young people may express themselves in ways that don't conform with their biological sex. Now, why is it that these things need to be included in a space that is supposedly to teach students reading, writing, arithmetic, some science, and a little bit of history? Why do we have to talk about sex? Well, I guess we could make the argument that we do need sex ed, even though I think that that's the parents' responsibility. I think there's at least a halfway credible argument to teach that in perhaps biology or science class. But the legislature specifically passed a law saying we're not going to do DEI anymore. But then, my friends, let's go to page 14 of the Reducing the Risk revised 5th edition facilitator manual, page 14, class 1A, the outline of activities and notes to teacher. Quote, be sure your reading of the role play allows for inclusivity and does not reinforce one view of gender identity or gender stereotypes. You can do this by introducing Lee and Lee as a couple without specifying genders, by not differentiating the two Lees lines using stereotypical male and female voices. Yeah, we shouldn't do that, except, of course, that you can go right down the hall to the biology lab and pull just about any book off the shelf that will disprove everything that you're teaching your kids. Not to mention that, again, it's kind of against the law. How about page 71, class 4, activities, role play? Oh, I don't even, when we're talking about this subject, I don't even like the word role play. I mean, it immediately conjures up things that I don't think have any place in a classroom. Now, let's read. Quote, over the course of the role play activities, students will be in a position where they must role play sexual pressure situations with classmates of both a different and the same gender. This may be awkward for teens who are sensitive to the suggestion of same-sex romance, for teens who identify as gay or lesbian, or for teens. This is in Wyoming, my friends. This is in the curriculum. and it's been identified by the Administration for Children and Families to be outside the scope of their grant stipulations, and it's definitely outside the scope of the of Wyoming statute. And I mean, I guess, Mr. Legislator, Agent 29, how the heck are they getting away with this crap? Or they just think they're flying it under the radar and nobody's going to notice?
Yeah, I think that's a large part of it, that flying under the radar thing. But one of the problems, this is systemic throughout all agencies, is that we give the authority to various agencies to promulgate rules. And everybody's used to these big handouts about these are the rules, these are all the details. And there are myriads of them. You go through stacks and stacks of rules and different things that the various agencies have put into place. Like I said, we've had trouble with school districts doing their own thing and basically violating the rights of homeschoolers. And it just goes on and on and on. It is another case of the legislators having abdicated their responsibility to direct the agencies. This is how you're going to do things. And so now when we actually do step into that role and try to provide some direction, not so much. They don't want to listen to us. They already know what's best. After all, they're the professionals.
Of course they are.
They've been to school.
Well, and here's my question. And I know, having watched the legislature for 5-6 years, that this doesn't often happen. But why isn't the Education Committee hauling these people in front of the committee and demanding an explanation? I mean, there's a Wyoming law in place, and they're just not following. I mean, you don't get that option, Ken. I mean, if we're driving down the street and the speed limit says 30, and I open it up to 55, we're going to be pulled over and written a ticket. I can't say, well, I'm just ignoring that speed limit. I realize it's just a suggestion. I mean, that's not how the world works. I mean, evidently it is here, but.
Well, you're starting to see some people being held to account. Was it corporations that's going to bring in the people from Manderson as one example, or revenue? I don't remember which committee, but yeah, we're beginning to take offense that people are not willing to comply with the direction that the voters are the one that put us in there.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you look at, and of course the press tries to play this different, but there's been a lot of committee meetings. Or there was one, I shouldn't say a lot, but there was one recent one talking about pornography in schools. And I mean, we're not talking about Romeo and Juliet. And I think that, I didn't play that on the program, but Representative Bratton brought some examples to the last Sheridan GOP meeting, and her exact words were, "We are not talking about Romeo and Juliet. If you want to read them, I have examples right here. This is pornography." But the media and the redcoats, they want to try to play it off like you're banning books, and how dare you tell us how to operate our classrooms and our libraries. Well, the reason why is it's Wyoming law. I mean, not the pornography in the schools yet, but this DEI stuff, it absolutely is.
If we try to follow the Constitution and guard morality, then we're being heavy-handed. You see the same thing with Trump. He wants to be a dictator. He wants to be a ruler.
Yes.
And they say the same things about us. All we're trying to do is take us back to the fundamental of where we're supposed to.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you read, there's probably half a dozen articles on the cow pie and in other places that you would think that you guys are practicing your goose stepping, when you're not in committee. And it's just not true. The fact is that there are Wyoming statutes that prevent this sort of thing. So let's just get back to the letter here, and I will read you what it says. Wyoming's current prep curricula and program materials are out of compliance with the statute and HHS regulations and must be modified. Therefore, ACF, that is the Administration for Children and Families, instructs Wyoming to remove all content concerning gender ideology from its curricula, program materials, or any other aspects of its program delivery within 60 days of the receipt of this letter, and provide a copy of the modified materials for approval. The content flagged on the pages of this letter provides examples of gender ideology content that does not adhere to the statute. Wyoming is directed to remove these and all. And so it's not just Wyoming law that they're ignoring, it's federal statute.
Yeah, and those things have been cleaned up in some cases at the federal level. I'm trying to figure out how to delicately put things.
Not on this program.
I'll come back.
All right. So anyway, it's just another example of agencies in Wyoming, and a lot of times I talk about stories on this program and on the podcast, and you probably get the impression, well, this isn't happening in Wyoming. That's the common refrain of just about everybody here, because you don't want to believe that all of this bad crap is happening in your state. And, by and large, most people that live here are, I think, right of center. I think the vast majority of them are. We could quibble about the numbers on it, but I think we're probably a 60-40 split. The state voted for Trump 73%. So generally speaking, yeah, we're a pretty conservative bunch. And you don't want to believe that this sort of BS is happening in your schools or in your town or in your state at all.
On the other hand, if you disagree with us and you think that this stuff is healthy and this is the direction that education, that the world should take, there's still a warning here. And that is, you take federal money.
Yeah, with the shekels come the shackles.
With the shekels come the shackles. And this is an example of that, because this came about because of a grant application. Okay, if you're going to have a grant application, we're going to look at how you're doing things, make sure you're toeing the line. It works both ways. It cuts both ways.
Well, it's not just, and I think if you read this letter strictly, it's saying two different things. One, that the policies that the Wyoming Department of Health has, and Wyoming Education, I guess, are outside the scope of the grant. But it's also saying that those policies are outside the scope of statute. So those are two different things, right? So when you apply for a grant, the granting agency, or whomever it is, private agency or public, they say, hey, if you do these things, yeah, you're eligible for the grant. And if you're not doing those things, well, then you fall outside of it and we're not going to give you money. But the other thing that it's saying is this letter repeatedly mentions statute, where it says you are not only outside the terms of the grant, you're outside the terms of federal law. That's the difference. And I mean, and I am sure if we looked at the laws, some of the laws that were passed and signed last year and the previous session, we'd find out that what the Department of Health is doing is outside of Wyoming statute as well. But the only way that you get agencies and agencies and groups to follow the law is if you hold them to it. And therein lies the problem, my friends, that we have a whole bunch of laws that for whatever reason are not being enforced. And take a guess at who pays it. You do, and your children do, because this sort of garbage is being shoved down your children's throat. And there's very few people at the state that are actually doing anything about it. I mean, the legislature is to as much as they can, but okay. So the audit in Manderson, you brought that up, Agent 29. I think this is a really good example. We've had laws on the books for a long time that you have to audit your books. If you take state money or tax money, you've got to, over a certain amount, and I think that amount, it's like $500,000 or $1 million, but you have to have an audit. Well, there are some towns, smaller towns in Wyoming, Manderson, Kirby, couple of others, that just really aren't keeping any records at all. And in the case of Manderson, they don't even have bank statements, and they're just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's shock and amazement that a legislative committee would say, hey, we want to talk to these town officials and find out why they're not toeing the line. Well, if you listen to the media, well, how dare the Freedom Caucus demand people come to a meeting? How dare you subpoena them? Well, the reason why you subpoenaed them is they're already not following the law. So why should you believe that they're going to show up if you just ask them? You shouldn't. You have no reason to believe that they will acquiesce to that. And so that's why you got to subpoena them. So anyway, something to watch. I'm going to keep my ears on this thing. I think this is a big deal. It's certainly a big deal for Wyoming families. And yet another reason why, if you're able to, you should pull your kids out of public school and educate them at home. Because if you put your kids in a government school, guess what's going to come out the other end? A little government drone. Now, speaking of people that don't want to talk about the truth, ABC News, and this is not just this weekend. This happens every weekend in Chicago, maybe not to this degree. But from ABC News, there were over 54 people shot over the weekend in Chicago as the governor, J.B. Pritzker, rejects Trump's threat to send in the National Guard. And I've got a news report from Chicago. Let's go ahead and play that. I think it says ABC News on it. CBS.
Topping your news at 4:30, more than 50 people shot and 7 killed across Chicago so far this holiday weekend. Now, the violence is rising as conversations have been heating up about President Trump's preparation to possibly deploy the National Guard. CBS News Chicago investigator Tara Molina live for us at CPD headquarters. Tara, you found out that this weekend was, in fact, much more violent than it has been this time in previous years.
That's right, Marie. Significantly more violent, nearly double the shootings this holiday weekend than we tracked the last holiday weekend. And all of this as Chicago is under a very strong national spotlight. I asked police about that. You're looking at the scene of a mass shooting in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood early this morning, where police tell us 5 people between 17 and 36 years old were hurt. Recovering 4 guns from the scene, investigators are still looking into what happened. It's the 3rd mass shooting we've told you about this holiday weekend, with 7 people shot Saturday on South State Street, 2 women and 5 men hurt. Police say a shooter opened fire on a crowd from a car.
I think that's good enough. All right. So obviously this sort of thing happens in Chicago every holiday week, every weekend. I mean, you can, and there are very few national media outlets that cover all of the violence that happens in Chicago on I would say every day of the week, but it's just, I guess it's better headlines if it's on the weekend. But Ken, this might be fake news.
It could be, because we all know there are no guns in Chicago. It is a gun-free zone, so
yeah. I mean, they have more gun control laws.
I was struck as I watched that. I'm old enough to remember coming home from school every day, and the evening news would come on with Walter Cronkite or whoever was on, and they would give a body count of the combat in Vietnam every day. So many killed, so many injured. Those numbers, I don't believe, on most days ever approach what's going on in Chicago.
No, I don't think so. And think about this. So the first Desert Storm, you were there, Ken, and I remember being here and hearing, well, there was one soldier shot, and it was a topic of conversation in the classroom. Hey, look at this. The U.S. military is so good at what they do. We've had so few casualties, and here's several examples. Okay, so that show them on TV. And I remember watching the nightly news, and they would have the body count on the side of the TV, and it was Americans like 12, Iraqis like hundreds. 12 would be a bad day, right? But the same should be true in Chicago. But again, they have more gun control laws than anywhere in the country. So, all of this is definitely fake news. It has to be.
It's interesting you bring that up. We kind of had a running joke over there that, we kind of cut the tension of going into an area where we wouldn't really know what we were going to see, and say, well, at least we're not going into Chicago. At least we're not going into East St. Louis,
Hey, this is cake compared to those places. Well, the Illinois governor and the Chicago mayor are rejecting Trump's threat to send in the National Guard. And let's see, this is from ABC News. Quote, Trump says Chicago may be the next city for federal takeover. Donald Trump warned Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker in a post on social media, referencing recent crime in Chicago, saying Pritzker better straighten it out fast or we're coming. At least 54 people have been shot, 7 fatally, across Chicago over the Radical Communist Day weekend, including a drive-by attack that left 7 victims wounded, according to police. The violent holiday weekend came as Donald Trump renewed threats to send federal agents and National Guard troops to Chicago over the objections of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Trump on Saturday sent a warning to Pritzker in a post. Let's see here. Pritzker, a Democrat, responded in a news conference a week ago to an earlier Trump threat to straighten Chicago out, just like we did in D.C., by saying that the president's plan was, quote, unprecedented and unwarranted. It is illegal, it is unconstitutional, and it is un-American. I'll tell you what's un-American. Allowing gangs to run the streets and just shoot people with impunity. And even if they are caught, the problem is in places like Chicago and New York, depending on who the mayor is, and in other big cities, St. Louis, Baltimore, that these folks are arrested, and because they have no bail laws, they're just released onto the street to go shoot somebody else.
This kind of thing never happens in Wyoming. And then, oh, wait,
it does.
I'm sure you probably read about Darren Smith.
Yeah.
And say, we're coming for you.
No, by the way, that I didn't print that article out for today, but let's talk about that for just a second. There was a news piece out, I think the one I saw was in the Cowboy, where 90 federal agents swarmed the Wind River Reservation. And the point was to guns, drugs, whatever else they could find, it's, but I think that's absolutely appropriate. We cannot have places in this country where crime is just running rampant, where it is like there's no law enforcement stopping it. I mean, we just can't have that.
It kind of gets like a no-go zone.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's a really good example. In other places, in some cities in America that are what they call no-go zones, where the police don't even go there. It's kind of over the, I guess it was, where was I? I can't remember. Lovely Christine and I were somewhere, and I was, we were in Jackson, and I was relating the story of my first trip to Southwest Virginia and how I made a wrong turn on Mouth Card Road and almost died. And when I got out of there, there was traffic was stopped for a funeral, and there was a state trooper that's going, from car to car, and he came over and he noticed the pistol sitting on the seat of my pickup, and he goes, "Oh, what's that for?" And I told him, "Well, I just got lost on Mouth Card Road," and he said, "Son, you don't know this, but you almost died today." He said, "We don't go there." Well, there are places in this country where law enforcement doesn't go, or there's and we, for whatever reason, they've decided not to do that, and in some cases, like Chicago. The folks that are in power, J.B. Pritzker and that dumb mayor, I have a piece on him in just a second, tell the police not to prosecute, and that crime is a result of social conditions. So we should just send in the social workers. That's what Mom Dami wants to do. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it all boils down to an agenda, a leftist agenda, and you, my friends, are on the menu for it. Your property, your children, your friends, and the rest of your family. Because in Chicago, on any given day, you might be shot dead in the street. But there is some other folks. So an alderman in Chicago says that really it's Trump to blame, and that it's not the fault of gangs that we've let run unabated through the town. But Chicago Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez, wait until you listen to this guy, responded to the shootings in the city over the weekend by stating that, quote, "We also have had many, many instances where the administration has really escalated and exacerbated the violence in our country, in our inner cities. And what we have not seen is a really systemic investment, and that will actually address the core issues." Now, this alderman is obviously a radical Democrat, and he is one of those people that thinks that crime, that really, it's a social problem, and it might be a mental disease, and what these people really need is treatment after they rob your house and they shoot up the street going down. I've got a piece of sound from, I believe this was on CNN, but it's this Byron Sigcho Lopez. Go ahead and play that for me, Ken.
Out front now, Chicago Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez. He represents an area that is more than 50% Hispanic, and he was with the mayor over the weekend. Alderman, thanks for being with us. First, I want to ask, what is the latest you're hearing about when this immigration operation is actually set to start?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to share this. We are hearing there can be any moment Trump has said that he wants to do it after Labor Day. So we're expecting deployment any point, probably before September 5th.
So as Trump touts the way that the crackdown in D.C. has led to a decrease in crime, he argues that cities like Chicago should work with the administration to see similar results. What's your response?
Well, we have a very direct response to the Trump regime because this cannot be considered administration. This is a regime that is trying to solve critical and chronic problems, as I heard the governor, with more violence, with deployment of military forces that have proven, in the case of LA, to just escalate and make matter worse. I think that the correlation that they're using to say that Chicago or any other city will be safer is completely driven by an administration that is really out of touch, is really consolidating for what we're seeing a dictatorship, an authoritarian regime.
Okay, all right, I
that
can't
is
take this
distracting
guy
Americans
anymore.
from.
All right. So at the end of that, he says it's really the Trump administration that's exacerbating all of this violence. Okay, so you have radical groups within Chicago that have organized protests against ICE and against federal law enforcement and definitely against the National Guard troops. And we can get to that. I think that's an interesting point, too. I'll get to that in just a second. But that you have radical groups that are organized to protest against them. And these folks really are the ones creating chaos on the street. And then this alderman is claiming, well, no, really all this violence, it's a response to the threat of National Guard troops coming in and stopping all the crime. I mean, how much can you twist that logic anymore?
Well, that's evident when he says simply, this isn't an administration, it's a regime.
Yeah.
Therefore, the things that are being done legally by federal law are set aside because this is a regime, it's illegitimate. Same thing he tried to do in the first Trump administrations. Trump's illegitimate, he shouldn't be there anyway. This isn't real.
Yeah, it's not the law.
Yeah, we get the same thing in Wyoming when we were just covering that. We say, this Freedom Caucus people, they'll be gone shortly and things get back to normal.
Yeah, just ignore them as long as you can. But the truth is that crime is not something that we can ignore, nor should we. And just look, I've listened to so many different interviews from people that live in Washington, D.C., and how grateful they are that the National Guard is actually cleaning things up. And I think there's been something over like 2,000 arrests. And I mean, that to me, that seems like a small number. And yeah, and a great point that the crime rate has dropped off precipitously in D.C. But Democrat politicians in Chicago, they don't want to do anything different. And it's, again, I don't understand how you can live in a place where violence is rampant, where it's very likely that you could be mugged or shot or have your property stolen, and you still keep voting for these idiots. Here's another one. J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois. This is from Breitbart. Trump deployments to cities are an invasion with U.S. troops. And this is where I want to get to this question of the National Guard. Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation, J.B. Pritzker said that President Donald Trump's deployment of federal law enforcement to cities was an invasion with U.S. troops. And it's I'm just going to read you the beginning of this, and then I've got a video of Pritzker. So the interviewer, his name is Ed O'Keefe, he says, Governor Pritzker, thank you for doing this. Thank you for your tour, blah, 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 blah. I want to start with the fact that we've now learned the Trump administration is preparing to launch what they call a major immigration enforcement here in Chicago in the coming days. Homeland Security said on Friday, quote, we're going to use L.A. As an example. So that mix of federal agents deploying with the assistance of National Guard troops, potentially to protect them and federal property. What's your response to all of those apparent plans? So go ahead and play the J.B. Pritzker video. The National Guard, well, they're an invasion. Go ahead and hit play. Maybe.
On Friday, we traveled to Chicago and sat down with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. He invited us there in advance of the expanded federal presence Secretary Noem was just talking about. Here's what he told us.
We hope that they don't send any troops along with ICE. And if they do, they'll be in court pretty quickly because that is illegal. Posse Comitatus does not allow U.S. troops into U.S. cities to do to fight crime, to be involved in law enforcement. That's not their job.
if they're doing federal immigration work, a judge might say, if they're protecting those federal agents, that's okay. I mean, you'll just fight that in court as long as you can.
Well, National Guard troops, any kind of troops on the streets of an American city don't belong unless there is an insurrection, unless there is truly an emergency. There is not.
Have you been briefed by
not.
anyone in the
54
administration
people
about these
shot.
plans?
That's not
No
an
one in the
emergency.
administration, the president or anybody under him, has called anyone in my administration and me have not called the city of Chicago or anyone else. So it's clear that in secret they're planning this. Well, it's an invasion
Nothing
with
secret
U.S.
about
troops
this.
if they in fact do that. The other thing is, they ought to be coordinating with local law enforcement.
I can't
They ought to
stand
let
this
us
idiot
know when
anymore.
they're coming, where.
Okay, so posse comitatus. That's a principle that U.S. troops can't operate on U.S. soil. That is, the Marines, the Navy. Of course, the Navy can't operate on soil anyway. But the Air Force. So federal troops. Okay, they can't operate on U.S. soil. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? It's posse comitatus, and he's right, unless it's an invasion or an insurrection, rather. So a good example of this is the Whiskey Rebellion, and this is also one of my favorite stories. But it's the only military operation that was led by a U.S. president. But George Washington led the troops, and what happened is there were some taxes that were passed, and I think, it was in rural Pennsylvania. They said, well, we're just not going to pay the taxes. And so George Washington rallied his troops, and he actually sent word to them. He says, hey, we're coming. Stop it, or we'll stop it. Now, think about this, right? Like, if you're, and we have to get in the Wayback Machine, Ken, but if you're the guy that's running this insurrection, and you're not going to pay the tax on whiskey, and you get a message, George Washington is coming. He's on his way. After you clean out your drawers, what are you going to do? I mean, who really wants to go up against George frickin' Washington? Nobody, right? Well, they didn't want to either, because by the time George Washington got there, the insurrection was over. Now, he was leading U.S. troops, but it was an insurrection. At least that's how it was classified. But here's the question. The National Guard are state troops, are they not? Now, they are under the control. I mean, the president can use state troops with the National Guard. I mean, there's several people from Wyoming that are stationed in all places overseas. In fact, I've got a friend of ours, that should be back, I think, in a couple of weeks from being in Jordan for a year. So the federal government does deploy the National Guard, but really, they're sort of state troops, and I don't know that fits in with posse comitatus. I mean, it doesn't fit within the strict definition anyway.
Yeah, you just opened up a can of worms.
It's
there.
a big can of worms, man.
But we've had legislation saying that the state needs to abide by our Constitution.
Yes.
And the governor then is required to train the militia to arm and equip and train the militia.
That's different.
Which is everybody between the ages of 17 and 70, I think it says. And one of those funny things that we still have out there floating in the Constitution that everybody just chooses to ignore. And that would be a wholly different thing. That would be, I think, what was intended, because each state had its own militia, a volunteer organization, not a standing army. And yet that has been co-opted into federalized, into where they're inseparable, and the lines are really blurred. And that's something that I don't imagine will ever get straightened out.
No, and I think my point here is that there's not a strict, there's no bright line here that says this is posse comitatus, this is not. But when you have, and I think that roving gangs on the streets of Chicago, when there's 54 people shot on one weekend, I mean, you could very easily describe that as an insurrection. Now, I don't know what the definition of that term is, but it's very clear that J.B. Pritzker or that idiot mayor of Chicago, that none of them are really in control of the Chicago streets. I mean, that's obvious. We could take the entire program and we could just roll all the names of the people that have been killed in the last probably 5 years in Chicago, and it would take up the whole program. And all of that has been done right under the nose and perhaps with the blessing of J.B. Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago.
Another question that's come up is what constitutes an invasion? What we've seen over the last 4, 6, 8 years coming across not just the southern border, but from everywhere. how do you define an invasion? How do you, I guess a lot of it, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I think. But.
Well, and like I said, a lot of these lines get blurred. We're going to go to a break here in just a second, but I want to finish up this this segment here. So if, let's say, that a police force has a warrant to search, we'll just say Agent 29's home. And Agent 29 is accused of all sorts of nefarious activity. And the warrant says we're specifically looking for X, Y, and Z. And they go in and they find evidence of other crimes that Agent 29 has committed. Well, those are against the law too, right? Those don't get ignored in the execution of those warrants. So here's my question. I don't really have an answer to this, but I think it's one to think about. So federal troops can go in and enforce immigration law, right? All right, we're going to round up the illegal immigrants and we're going to shuffle them off to the nearest country that would take them. Uganda. Maryland man, have a nice trip to Uganda. But if they are doing that operation and they find evidence of other crimes that are being committed on the street, well, it's a law enforcement operation, so those people will get arrested too. And it's, I'm just flabbergasted the lengths that Democrats will go to further their agenda, and it's all at the expense of American citizens. And it's really a disservice. And so let's go to the break, and when we come back, I've got a couple of reminders that don't worry, politics can always get dumber. And, some lighthearted stuff on the program. We'll be back in a minute.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States gold and silver buyer's guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap, and your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. Thank you for listening, my friends. Thank you for watching the program. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without you, or perhaps create bad poetry. I don't know. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And it's you got to be thankful for the blessings that you've been given too. And certainly everything that I have is compliments of the big guy upstairs. So.
Yeah, I always think back when you use that line, go back to Rush and talent on loan from God. Actually, one of the most humble things to say. This is not mine; it's His. But in my mind, I always go to, well, God wasn't using it anyway.
I think he very much was.
He didn't need that talent. He has others.
Well, some people that don't have talent, that I don't know how they keep getting elected, but one of them, and again, this is an example of how, don't worry, politics can always be dumber. And dumber is not even really a word. It's more dumb or whatever. I don't know. Agent 29's wife isn't here. She's always correcting my grammar. Anyway, from Reason.com, Gavin Newsom's trolling of Donald Trump is a painful reminder that politics can always be dumber. And I quote, political debates have always been asinine, at least as long as I've been watching. The greatest political zingers stick in our minds because 99% of the discourse on campaign trails involves politicians spouting prepackaged platitudes. I still remember the 1988 vice presidential debate when Lloyd Bentsen retorted, "Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy," after Dan Quayle compared himself to JFK. My favorite line was from Edwin Edwards in his Louisiana governor's race against the former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke. Quote, "The only thing we have in common is that we both have been wizards beneath the sheets." Edwards was corrupt. A bumper sticker, "Vote for the crook. It's important." Now, this was an interesting time in politics because Edwards absolutely was corrupt. But David Duke, the KKK guy, he was kind of leading in the polls. So Republicans had to kind of swallow their medicine and start campaigning for Edwards. In the not-so-distant past, politicians, especially at the presidential level, have showed at least a little bit of decorum. Part of Donald Trump's appeal is his rejection of those long-standing ground rules, but his humor is reminiscent of that of a schoolyard bully. He tirelessly trots out dopey insults and types out long, conspiracy-laden, all-caps tirades. Now, obviously, this guy really isn't on Trump's side, but he's bringing out the point that Gavin Newsom is far worse than Donald Trump. The fracas is hilarious, and I'm not proud to say so, given that I don't approve of this childish nonsense and believe civility, obviously, this guy's on the left, even if it's just a pretense, is crucial for a healthy democracy. Nevertheless, Newsom's posts are hitting a nerve because they replicate Trump's style, language, and insults and doltish phrasing. We thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, here's an example of what I'm talking about. Wow, and this is from Gavin Newsom. Fox News can't stop talking about me. Gavin Newsom, America's favorite governor. Tonight, their entire primetime lineup is about me. Jesse Waters kept calling me daddy. Very weird. Not interested, but thank you. Fox and MAGA have Newsom derangement syndrome. They should cry harder. Sad. Gavin Newsom. Now, Trump's White House account and independent MAGA accounts have this creepy habit of posting AI-generated images as Trump of Superman. I don't think they're creepy at all. In fact, I kind of like them. And a soundbite we should go back and get is Harriet when she was in Dayton, and she looks at the crowd and says, "You guys really have to realize when you're being trolled." This is exactly what Trump does in getting Gavin Newsom to retort like this. And see, it's so easy to push the left. All you have to do is mock them. If there's one thing leftists can't stand, either the redcoats or the Democrats, if there's one thing they can't stand, it's being made fun of. And that's what Trump is brilliant at. And it's one of the things this author doesn't really get either, is that all of it is trolling.
I think I'm starting to get a bit of a sense of humor.
We're going to have to clean that one up a little bit so you can hear it. But anyway, that was Harriet saying, you guys have to realize when you're being trolled. And it's if you go search Gavin Newsom tweets about Donald Trump. There's a whole bunch of them that are absolutely idiotic. Now, let's see if there's another one in here. No. Okay. So anyway, moving on. And I've had kind of a rough baseball season. And my Texas Rangers, man, they'll win one, they'll lose two, they'll win two, they'll lose three, and it's just
Oh, spare me your pitiful whining.
Yeah, well, you're a Colorado Rockies fan, so I mean, I get your pain. I mean, are they still the worst team in baseball?
No, they ruined it.
Oh, they did. How?
Yeah, they actually had a pretty good little win streak there, and they are no longer the worst team in the modern era.
Well, that's too bad. I mean, why would they snatch victory of such a record? I mean, snatch defeat from
from the jaws of victory.
That's what I was getting at. Well, I don't know if you noticed this, and you probably didn't, but I did, being the baseball aficionado that I am. Major League Baseball just brought out their first female umpire, and she's been the umpire in 2 games. But interestingly enough, according to the statistics, she's on the bottom of the rung when it comes to MLB umpires. Now, you might say that the umpires have not been doing a good job this year. I, for one, I torture the lovely Christine, quite frequently with baseball, and I try not to do it every day. But I mean, come on, there's so many baseball games, and I love baseball, so why not watch them? But I am the one that'll be sitting on the couch and screaming at the TV. Maybe not screaming is probably the wrong word. Yelling, no. Maybe I just comment that, oh, come on, ump, that was a strike, or no, there's no way that was a strike. I mean, we all do that, right? If you've been to a baseball game and there's a low pitch that's, below the strike zone, you hear the crowd boo, oh no, as if the people in left field can see what the pitch is. I mean, it's just it's part of the game. And my theory on the whole of this is whether or not the umpire is doing a good job. Of course, we want the umpire to do a good job, but that's all part of the game. And I think when you remove that part of it, it takes out, an essential part of what baseball is. That it's somebody behind the plate, and you'll never convince me. It would be hard to convince me that umpires are favoring one team or another. I think that generally referees, on the whole, doesn't matter what the sport is, try to do a good job.
Unless you're in the NFL and you're Kansas City.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
know. The zebras. No, that it's true in the NFL as well, like with ball placement. So they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get rid of the chain.
No more chains.
Yeah, and have a little sensor in the ball or something. And to me, that's part of like a running back who knows how to manipulate his body.
Sure.
And cover up the placement.
And here's another part of the game. I when I was playing Legion baseball, I was the catcher. And one of the best skills of any good catcher is to frame a pitch. So when one comes in that's close, but you know it's a ball, you quickly grab it and move your mitt a little bit. And you just move it right into the strike zone. And if your umpire is not really, really good, they'll look at the mitt about where it's at, where you caught the ball. And sometimes you'll get a freebie out of it. Well, that's all part of the game. But when you inject like this automatic strike zone, if you watch a baseball game, they've got the little box, right? And they show you where the pitch went. Well, my question is, sometimes a curveball, what's so crazy about them is sometimes they'll catch a piece of the strike zone and they'll end up off the plate, and that's the whole beauty of a curveball. But it still catches a corner, and in the end, you can't hit it because it's off out of the strike zone. Well, there's a piece in the Blaze, and it's questioning, are MLB umpires getting worse? Fans say yes, but the stats, my friends, might disagree with you. And as you know, on this program, I'm kind of fond of voting records and rattling off stats, how often somebody votes with the Democrats. Eric Barlow, 81.88% of the time in his whole career, votes with the Democrats. So obviously, I'm into stats. But here's what the Blaze says about this. Robot wives, robot sex partners, and even robot entrepreneurs have made headlines this year. But what about robot umpires? It seems every baseball fan has called for robot umpires at some point, not me, during the 2025 season, especially after fans saw an automated ball strike challenge system being used during the All-Star game. The meter maids of baseball is what it's being referred to. Multiple calls garnered a challenge from players that changed the course of the game, leaving viewers to invoke the digital strike zone placed on the screen whenever an umpire gets a wrong call. But are the umpires actually getting worse? Using numbers from the recent umpire scorecards post, overall accuracy for umpires in 2025 is 93%. While that may seem low, it's a combination of called ball accuracy averages, 97%, and called strike accuracy averages, about 88% of the time. Scoring the average accuracy rating of an umpire throughout the course of the season and weighing that against what is expected of them, we see that fewer umpires are dipping below the expected performance levels every year. In 2022, 35 umpires had an average accuracy rating below what was expected of them. In 2023, that number was 27. And in 2024, it was 21. In 2025, it's only 16. Looking back through the years, not only are poor averages less abundant, but the MLB even seems to be getting less lenient about giving inaccurate umpires the go-ahead to call games. In other words, MLB is taking a harder look at this, and if you're a crappy umpire, remember last year this was a big news story, but there was an umpire that was calling strikes that were like way off. I mean, he was terrible at his job, and I mean even so bad is it would lead the objective baseball fan to look at that and say he has to be doing that on purpose. Well, he's no longer an umpire. In 2025. 5 of the 6 worst underperforming umpires in terms of average accuracy versus expected accuracy have played 5 games or fewer. Just 4 umpires inside the bottom 10 for worst accuracy overall have umpired more than 5 games. And one of those is Jen Pawal, I think is how you pronounce her name, the first female umpire to call balls and strikes in a regular season game. As an end-of-days scenario for the league, but it was not as bad as expected. While Pawal did not actually rattle any cages in her debut and performed just below average, her second game went mostly unreported when she performed better than her first game. Still, it should be noted that she has the 5th lowest overall accuracy for umpires this season and the 3rd worst against the expected average. But with what seems to be the new normal, she's been limited to only 2 games during the year. So what I'm getting at, my friends, is while you may be watching one game or another, and maybe the umpire's doing a good job, maybe they're not, it's not representative of the whole. And the statistics, they kind of show that really the umpires aren't doing that bad a job. Now, here's the other thing that I would bring up, is that we expect the strike zone, which should stay the same for all batters. And, I mean, that makes sense if you think about it. But typically, the strike zone is from the bottom of your knee right up here to the numbers on your jersey. Well, if you're a tall guy, that strike zone is a heck of a lot bigger. One of the reasons why Rickey Henderson is the greatest leadoff man of all time is because he had a really small strike zone. And I mean, his stance was just kind of a little bit different. And so to get a called strike on Rickey Henderson was pretty hard. I mean, the strike zone was pretty small, and that was done intentionally. And so he had, he got on base way more than some of the other leadoff people simply because of the strike zone. And so, I mean, I really don't buy this whole umpires are getting worse thing. I think that referees generally do a pretty good job. And I don't think, and, the elder Mr. Iverson is, he was a basketball referee for 30 years. And he'll tell you that the only thing that a referee wants to do is do a good job. And call a good game. And, referees, they have their own politics in their circles too. And so I really don't think that it's a matter of, an umpire doing what, intentionally bad. I just think that it's the same as it's always been. And I think this push for a robot strike zone, I think that's a really bad idea.
I had a friend in high school, his name's Jim Core. And for those who are radical NFL fans, they will remember Jim because he got to be quite famous during the referee strike. And I remember having a couple of conversations with him. We kind of got back in touch and just talking about what it was like to referee an NFL game. And I think another factor that comes into it is just the speed at which things happen. You're trying to see what happened and make sense of it as quickly as you possibly can. And some of the other emotions that we kind of put into it, well, you just like the Chiefs. Really don't have time to come into play. So, so he's given me. It's not that I'm rambling, folks. It's that I'm getting a symbol of a sign language over here to just drag on ad infinitum and boring. While you, what are you doing with your wristwatch over there?
Well, I
You
forgot
think
my
you're
phone.
You think you're Dick Tracy?
I am, and sometimes it feels that way. But I did forget my phone at home this morning on the way to the studio. That happens every once in a while, and so I have to operate everything on my wristwatch, which I swore I would never get one of these things, but they're pretty darn handy, especially when you forget your phone. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. It's a little bit early. But we'll take a break and we're going to come back. There's a piece in Wildfile that I hesitate to talk about, but I can't resist because the guy who wrote it. We'll do that when we come back. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. All right. Well, we have a very interesting guest on the radio and or on the phone. And every once in a while, the state auditor, Christy Racinas, and I kind of go back and forth about baseball. And so she's called in. She wants to talk about robot umps. Christy, welcome to the program.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Well, I'm coming in hot, so I have zero context. So you're getting my most authentic self this morning, but I just heard baseball and I had to shoot you a text. So,
yeah, well, so to fill in our audience real quick, you're a Phillies fan. I mean, no accounting for taste. And I, of course, am a Texas Rangers fan. And every once in a while, the state auditor and I go back and forth, ribbing each other about our favorite baseball team. So what's your take on this whole robot strike zone business?
So, and again, I know just enough to be dangerous. I was unsure at first, and I think we all know the frustration of when an ump, when you perceive that an ump has ruined your game, which that has happened to you, it has happened to me, but also that's the vibe, right? That is baseball.
Yes.
People have been angry at the ump since the dawn of time, and I don't know if you want to take that away. However, I did go to a minor league game.
Aren't those
summer.
fun?
Oh my gosh, they're a fraction of the price. They're excellent baseball. So my favorite minor league team is the Iron Pigs, which is the AAA affiliate for the Phillies. And so that was my first experience with the Robo Ump. And it was interesting because then the new politics are, the catcher can question the call, the pitcher can question the call, the batter can question the call, which is super fascinating. And I didn't hate it, but I need to know more. I need to experience more. But it was sort of interesting because if you're the guy that is constantly questioning the call and you run out your team's opportunities, then I don't know. Anyway, that's my Monday. I mean, I know it's not Monday morning, but that's my Monday morning rant about it so far.
Well, I agree with you that the umpire is part of the game. And, one of the points I made earlier is I was talking about Ricky Henderson. And one of the reasons that he got on base so often that he did is he had a really small strike zone. And so it was, the strike zone is from, the bottom of your knee to the numbers on your letter or on your jersey.
Right.
And, if you're a really tall guy, let's say you're, of course, we're past the time when pitchers had to bat, but let's say you're the guy the size of Randy Johnson. Okay, I mean, he was well over 6 feet, and so the strike zone for him is way bigger than it would be for a guy who's 5'2". And I don't see any way where this robot strike zone, as we'll just derisively call it, I don't see how you could adjust that. And I think that that's one of the things that umpires are able to do. That the little box on your screen. I mean, I don't think that it accurately displays what's happening on the field.
Well, and I'm again knowing very little. I don't think the strike zone isn't a rectangle either.
No.
So anyway, like I said, the jury's out still for me a little bit. I didn't mind it, and of course, when the call doesn't go my way, I totally want the robo-ump. And then when it does, I'm less enthusiastic.
Right, exactly right. Well, I appreciate you calling in.
As we all are.
Auditor Racinas, we got to have you on the program here pretty quick. There's several things.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll I'll let you go, but we'll set up a time where you can come on the program and we'll visit about it. But thanks for calling in.
Awesome. Have a great week. Thanks.
All right, thanks. All right, Ken.
Bye.
Now let's finish up our break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about this dumb op-ed. This is a guy that I just really wish he'd stop writing, but I mean, what are you going to do? I guess you give a guy a computer and it's hard to say what's going to happen. And it definitely happened this time. So we'll talk about that when we come back.
Everybody say
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely, and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way.
Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Now, there's an opinion piece that shows up in the in Wildpile, and it's entitled, "What if Wyoming were really the equality state?" And I find pieces like this to be really irritating, just in the sense that we are the equality state, and there are always these people that are trying to tear us down. And it happens to, I mean, it's not just Wyoming, it happens everywhere. Think about how many radical Democrats say that, we're living in a dictatorship. There was a protest yesterday up on I-90, and there were people holding signs with swastikas on them. Keeping it classy there, Democrats. We're going to talk about that probably tomorrow. But anyway, there's this piece by David Romvet, and I wanted to explain to you exactly who this guy is. He's a poet. I think he's the poet laureate, or at least he was at one point. And so just context about him.
In his case, it's pronounced lower yet.
Lower yet, yeah. So at one point, he was a teacher in Jeffrey City. Jeffrey City, of all places. I mean, there's like 12 people that live there. In fact, there were probably 12 people in his class. Well, he read a poem that he wrote, and I'm not even kidding here, about a horse penis. And some parents were a little bit freaked out about it, and they didn't think that was appropriate. And so they fired Mr. Romvet from being a teacher because of his poem. Well, here's what he says, and I'm just going to read you the first part of the first paragraph here, and then I'm going to tell you why he's absolutely wrong. First, quote, over 21,000 Wyomingites, let's see here, that's a wild pile advertisement. You don't want to hear that. The Great Seal of the State of Wyoming pictures in its center a draped female figure reminiscent of Lady Justice holding a staff flying a banner with the words equal rights. In 1935, the legislature officially designated Wyoming the equality state, and the motto institutionalized a long-time nickname based on the fact that Wyoming was both the first territory and the first state to grant women the right to vote. Wyoming is the first state that did that. Wyoming, in 1920, Jackson voters elected an all-female town council and mayor. One candidate defeated her male husband. The newly elected council then appointed women to serve as clerk, treasurer, health officer, and the marshal. It was the first time an American municipal government was managed entirely by women. It's exciting to think of my home as a place committed to equality, but it is so disheartening when I learned that a 2024 report from the Wyoming Women's Foundation showed women in Wyoming earned 70 cents to every dollar that men earned. This is a long time running Democrat lie, that there's this huge gender wage gap. An even more extreme wage difference was shown in the June 2024 Wyoming Workforce Report. On average, annual income in the state, $37,986 for women, $57,574 for men, indicating that women earn just 66 cents for each dollar that men earn. Now, this is a classic example that statistics lie, and liars use statistics. And I'll admit that I use statistics on my show pretty frequently, but I always try to back them up, tell you exactly what it means, what it could mean, and kind of try to break them down. But there is a piece from the Wall Street Journal that was published on July 26th of 2012. So quite a while ago, and maybe things have changed since then in Wyoming, but I doubt it. And here's what it says. It's entitled, "The Gender Wage Gap is a Myth." Quote, here's President Obama. Let's see here. President Obama, myth one, women get less pay for equal work. The spurious assertion that women are paid 77 cents, notice the number, for a man's wage dollar comes from comparing the earnings of all full-time men with those of all full-time women. The comparison is bogus for two reasons. First, it lumps together men and women who work different numbers of hours. Any hours above 35 hours a week. On average, full-time women work fewer hours than full-time men, often because they prefer it. When comparisons are made between men and women who work 40 hours a week, women make 87% of men's earnings, according to the Labor Department. For men and women who work 30 to 34 hours a week, women make more, 109% of men's earnings. Second, the gap claim averages for each gender earnings from many and disparate vocations. For example, it averages women who work as social workers with men who work as investment bankers, female elementary school teachers with male engineers, and male loggers with female administrative assistants. For their own reasons, many women enter so-called helping professions such as nursing, teaching, elder care, health services, nutrition, and social work. These occupations pay less than do some more dangerous and physically demanding lines of work that attract more men: engineering, mining, operating construction machinery. Legitimate comparisons look at men and women with the same job tenure in the way, same position at the same firm. If there's a big difference under those circumstances, many may be discrimination, giving women grounds to sue. Federal law prohibits discrimination and permits such suits. So my point here is that not only is the gender wage gap a bunch of bullcrap, it's statistically flawed because you're comparing a whole bunch of different occupations and assuming that they're all the same. The truth is that in most cases, men and women are pretty much paid equally for equal work. And in some cases, women are paid more. Here's another one. Women are discouraged. This is myth number 2. Women are discouraged from enrolling in higher paid fields such as science, technology, engineering, and math. That's not true at all. No one prevents women from taking the curricula they prefer to get ahead. However, fewer women chose to major in engineering, chemistry, and physics. More choose to take English literature, communications, and gender studies. Graduates in these fields are usually paid less than in the sciences. Data for degrees awarded show that women are scoring ahead of men. According to the National Center for Education Statistics Digest, women were projected to get 58% of master's and bachelor's degrees and over half of PhD degrees for the 2011-2012 academic year. Data on the courses of undergraduate study, which women choose to reveal their vocational preferences. In 2010, the top 5 women-heavy majors were family and consumer sciences and health sciences. Those were all 88% female. The library science, 87%, health professions, 85%, public administration, 82%, and education, 80%. The top 4 man-heavy majors are more highly paid but draw relatively few women. They were military technologies, applied sciences, that's only 4% female, transportation and materials moving, 11%, engineering and engineering technologies, 17%, and computer and information sciences and support services, 18%, or economics, 30%. So what I'm getting at here is you're not comparing apples to apples. And in many cases, what you're doing is you're just like trying to create statistics, get the numbers to tell you what they want.
Here in Wyoming, if you don't have a college degree, and you spend a lot of time talking about college degrees, well, there are a lot of folks that don't have a degree.
Yeah.
My son, for example, did extremely well. The reason he did well is he went out in the oil field, and he took a job that very few women will do.
Right. Because it's physical labor, and it's manually intensive labor. And I'm not saying that women can't do it. You just see a relatively small amount of women do that.
Very, very uncomfortable most of the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not to say they can't. It's not to say that they won't. It's just to say that, it's physically demanding. And, I mean, most women don't want to do that type of work. And, there isn't any giant wage gap, but this is a myth that Democrats use all the time. And when you get down to the numbers are a lot different than reality. So here's one, and I think we've got enough time to do this. So I found this video this morning of John Stossel, and I really miss the specials he would do. I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or wherever he was working, but when he would go around and do these investigative reporting things. And so, but now he's done a lot of work talking about socialism. And his piece that I just saw this morning was, the next wave of socialist politicians will bring crisis, not change. From free buses to rent control, their big promises ignore the hard lessons of socialism's failure. Let me just read you a little bit of the piece, and then I've got the video, and we'll go ahead and watch it. In Minneapolis, Democratic Socialist Omar Fatah is probably going to be the next mayor. In New York, better say there's an 80% chance that Zoran Mamdani will be the next mayor. We have to continue to elect more socialists, he says, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. But he should be apologetic. Socialism wrecks lives. Mamdani promises that buses will be fast and free for every New Yorker. Free would be nice, but if the city could afford it, and they can't. And it's a peculiar proposal from a man who complains about what government does now. These are the slowest buses in the country, but will they move faster when they're free? No. Let's go ahead and play this.
Socialist politicians are on the rise.
I'm running for mayor.
This Democratic socialist will probably be the next mayor of Minneapolis. And socialist Zoran Mondani is likely to be the next mayor of New York City.
We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
But they should be apologetic. Socialism always fails. In my last video, I covered some of Mamdani's bad ideas, but he has more. So I made this second video.
This campaign is for every New Yorker who believes that government's job is to actually make our lives better.
Mamdani says he'll make our lives better by giving us free stuff.
I'll make childcare available to all New Yorkers at no cost.
I like where he stands on freezing rent, making public transit cheap and free.
Childcare, universal at no cost to New York families. Buses, fast and free for every New Yorker.
And yet he has noticed that government doesn't do a great job now.
These are the slowest buses in the country.
Buses and subways are a good example of socialist confusion about what makes things work. I asked people, who do you think built New York City's subway?
This is great.
I think it was the government.
Either President Eisenhower or maybe like a mayor.
Union workers.
It's logical to think that public transportation is something that must be done by government. Who else could afford to dig tunnels and create the system where everyone, rich and poor, ride for relatively little money? No private business would do that. The greedy owners wouldn't be able to charge riders enough to make a profit. But actually,
the original subways in New York were all private.
It carried tens of millions of passengers.
You mean
private
subways were
companies
private?
built most of the subways. Then, after 50 years, they said, let's raise the fare from a nickel to a dime.
People didn't like the idea of paying a higher fare. And the mayor took advantage of that and said, well, fine, the government will take it over and we won't raise the fare.
But of course, government did raise it. Now a ride costs almost $3, and the subways have problems.
Tunnels are deteriorating. Delays are inevitable.
And when government tries to build new subways, they struggle. This one was supposed to be done in 1938. Then they said 1980. It's still not done. And it's already the world's most expensive subway line. They work so slowly that the subway cars built for it, cars that cost $1 million each, now won't be used because they no longer fit the tracks. That's what you get when government runs things. The socialist politicians also say they'll make workers' lives better by raising the minimum wage to $30 an hour. That's popular. Last year, California's fast food workers celebrated the new $20 minimum wage.
My workers, we did this.
But when companies have to pay even beginners at least $20 an hour.
You didn't build that.
Pizza Hut preemptively laid off 1,200 delivery drivers like Michael Ojeda.
What's the point of the raise if you don't have a job anymore?
18,000 fast food jobs vanished, while other states added jobs.
All right.
Also, consumers have to pay more.
Is that Zoran Mamdani, he has no idea how things actually work. Or maybe that he does, and it's just platitudes. But you can tell by looking at the polls that most people think that, it's going to be great. Free child care, free transportation, free everything. But anytime government gets involved, it always fails, or at the very least, it ends up costing you more. And the subway line, and I didn't know that about the New York subway until I watched the video this morning, that one piece, that it was started in 1938 and it's still not complete. I mean, that's a perfect example, perfect example of what socialism actually does.
That, lest there's any doubt, that gives a little bit of breathing room for the folks out in California.
Yeah.
Where they're building the rail line.
Well, that's another good example.
Yeah.
High-speed rail. Okay, so I don't know how many billions of dollars they've dumped into that, but I think the number I saw was that they're right at like $130 billion, and they haven't even run a single car on it. But anytime you see, government-paid transportation, high-speed rail, subways, any of this stuff, it's just a giant money suck that everybody takes your money from you and that you really don't get anything in return.
But it's never going to happen in Wyoming. We don't want any high-speed rail from Cheyenne to Denver.
Oh, except that they're trying to.
That's right.
It is so bizarre. Like anytime you hear high-speed rail come out of a politician's mouth, what they're really talking about is greasing the palms of everybody else that's surrounded. Because think about this, right? If you're going to do a big project like that, we have to have environmental studies and, socioeconomic impact statements, and you're going to have surveyors. And I mean, it is a gigantic project, but think about how many ways you can shuffle money around to all of these different groups. And the example in California is perfect of what happens when you get government involved in those big projects.
Yeah, there's a corner in Stuttgart. And I've probably told you about it before. They started right after World War II doing this. They've got several major highways and the U-Bahn and the S-Bahn, all these other a hub. And they work so slowly in trying to get it done that it's been under construction now for 80 years. And every time they get one phase of it done, it's obsolete.
Yeah.
They can't use it, so it goes on perpetual. It's pretty sad.
Well, I mean, and that's just another good example of what happens with government. And it's so anyway, I wish the people of New York good luck. I really hope that they're able to prosper in their new socialism. My guess is they're probably not going to like it very much.
I wish the people of Wyoming good luck, because almost everything we've talked about today, that wouldn't happen in Wyoming.
No,
that would be the mantra coming out of Cheyenne, is we don't have that problem here.
Yeah, that's not a Wyoming problem. Yeah. It doesn't happen here. In fact, when Chi-Com Som Albert Summers was Speaker of the House, we heard that over and over and over. We need Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems. We don't need any of this other stuff. We don't have radical leftists that are operating here, except for maybe him, the SLLF board member. Let's see, we've got about 10 minutes left, and here's an interesting one. And again, this is one that, this won't happen here, from Breitbart News. The piece is entitled, "Raise the Colors. People raising the English flag in England are extremists." Now, how many times have I brought you stories of when a citizen has raised up a historical American flag, or the Gadsden flag, or I don't even know what this one is called, but the Appeal to Heaven flag, George Washington's flag. I brought you a story of how a Supreme Court justice, can't remember his name. Anyway, outside of his home, he had one of those flags flying, and the press went absolutely berserk and called him an extremist, and how dare you fly a Revolutionary War era flag. And I mean, it's just amazing.
Camping World getting in trouble with their giant
flags.
You
know? Yeah, they're gigantic flags.
Yeah, and the guy that owns that is a legal immigrant. And he says, I don't care how much you fine me, how much you throw at me, I'm not going to take it down.
Yeah, well, nobody picks on Perkins. I mean, they've always had big flags. But anyway, listen to this. Quote, "A top Labor parliamentarian has accused those involved in the anti-mass migration campaign to raise the English flag in England to be called extremists. Member of Parliament of Norwich South Clive Lewis has called the so-called far right are being patriotic Raise the Colors campaign of hanging England's St. George's Cross, or the Union Jack, in his constituency after the flags were raised outside of a migrant hotel in Bowthorpe last week. Speaking to the local Eastern Daily Press, the Caribbean Heritage MP said that, quote, while some may be flying the flag out of national pride, he claimed that far-right groups are using these flags to mark territory and intimidate the vast majority who reject their extreme views. They're trying to drag the flag back into being just their flag, only for their purposes of division and intolerance, undoing the brilliant way our multi-heritage England teams turned it into one of unity and pride. I've raised residents' concerns with the county council. Now, they can't look the other way when extremists use our streets to send an intimidating message." So it goes on from there. But the point is that apparently in England, raising the Union Jack is now a symbol of extremism. Now, of course, we wouldn't see any of that in America, and we certainly wouldn't see any of that in Wyoming, except, of course, that we do. How many times have there been articles printed about this flag or that flag, the Gadsden flag, the Navy Jack? Navy Jack is the one that has the snake and it's all stretched out and it says "Don't tread on me," as a symbol of extremism. And if you have one of those flags that has the Gadsden flag, the coiled up snake that says "Don't tread on me," obviously you're a right-wing extremist, even though all of those flags were flown during the time of the Revolutionary War. I mean, all of them are patriotic. And secondarily, and this is something that it actually takes a little bit longer to explain, but the left is obsessed with symbols. That if you do X, Y, or Z, like if you tear down a statue, well, that's going to fix all of the problems. Or if you prevent somebody from flying a flag, that somehow that's going to stop something that they're doing or change their mind. The truth is that the flag is a form of expression. Now, of course, and this is one of the other problems here too, that in the UK, you do not have a First Amendment. You do not have a freedom of speech. You don't have the freedom of expression. England has passed laws to where if you say the wrong thing on Facebook, you can be thrown in prison. That if you criticize the wrong person, which is, and just an aside, the lovely Christine and I, we've been planning a trip to Europe. We were going to do that for our honeymoon, and things didn't just work out. But one of the places we wanted to go was London. And I've become increasingly concerned that London may not be the best place for me, considering my proclivity for speaking my mind.
I was just thinking, and I saw that, and I thought the blind leading the blind, and you were talking about saying the wrong thing on Facebook. And anyway, back to our story.
Actually, you know what? Let's get him off the screen. That's actually a good example. So during the last legislative session, the debate was, and I don't remember the bill, but debate was going on and on and on and on and on, and it seemed like it would never stop. And at the time, and you know, when Agent 29 has time on the floor when nothing's going on, sometimes you can send him a text message and he'll respond. But I don't remember who suggested it first, but one of us said, "Hey, here's a good time to call for the previous question." And if you're not familiar with parliamentary procedure, the previous question, if you get 2/3 of a vote, it stops debate immediately, and you go directly to a vote. And so it's a way to shut off debate, but it's in Mason's manual, and it's also in the legislative rules, and it's in Robert's rules. It's a legislative motion that's entirely appropriate.
It's a way to fight back and stop a filibuster.
Yeah, exactly right. And so Ken stands up, and I don't remember the rule number, but he calls for previous question. And the Scott Clem there, who show him, yeah, okay, that's enough of that. He freaks out on social media and accuses Agent 29 of a whole bunch of terrible things. And why are you such a terrible person for trying to shut off debate? And how dare you do that, even though it's in the rules and even though it passed? But I'll tell you what it did, though. They used that motion one time, and then all of a sudden, things got back to work on the floor, and you really didn't see that many more filibusters because they realized that you were going to use that motion regardless of, the consequences.
Yeah, that whole session, there was a lot of back and forth. We had 2 or 3 of the old timers on the other side were grandstanding and basically burning up as much of the clock as they possibly can to slow our agenda. And the hue and cry was getting louder and louder and louder across the House floor. Somebody needs to stop this. That's one of those things that's kind of extreme, and when you do it, it's gonna cause some pushback. But who better to take the pushback? So
well, and it's weird because all of that pushback is all contrived because they realize what they're doing, that it's a filibuster, and they're just trying to waste time because they don't have any other option. They don't have the votes to stop anything, and so it was just an attempt to push debate as far as you possibly can, and it was the rule number 12-9. Is that what it is? 12-3, 12-9?
I think it's 12-9. I don't remember specifically because I had to go look it up and then write the script because it also matters how it is expressed.
How you say it.
Yeah, I demand the previous question. If you don't do it right, it's invalid and the speaker will throw it out or whoever is in charge.
But the funny part about that is when you did it, nobody really knew how to handle it. It was weird, because I'm sitting up there and I've been a parliamentarian, not registered, but I've been a parliamentarian a lot for a lot of years, and I was just snickering because I'm like, this is like parliamentary procedure 101. How did you miss that one?
Well, it was also interesting because there was a decision made which was an error.
Yeah, it was wrong.
And I had to then call up the Rules Committee and go back and bring them up and go review it. And eventually I got my way, but it was a bumpy ride.
Well, and if I remember correctly, it was one of the Democrats that suggested no, that he's got it right. That this is absolutely correct.
Sometimes it is, and it brings up several interesting things. Politics does make strange bedfellows. And one of the ways we talked before about, this 2/3 vote, even when we didn't have enough, if the Democrats were as opposed as possible to a Republican initiative, even if it's a rhino initiative, a lot of times the quote unquote hard right and the hard left teamed up together and got something done. Remember, John Baer and Liz Storer did at least one motion, one bill together. And it's weird how things work.
For sure. Well, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast, 2 hours on the program. Tomorrow on Cowboy State Politics Live, we're going to have the interview, I believe we're still on, with author Peter Cousins. He's got a new book out called Deadwood, Guns, Greed, and there's one other name I can't remember on it. But it's a fascinating book. I enjoyed reading. I'm almost all the way through it. So we're going to talk to him tomorrow on the program. Don't miss the Cowboy State Politics podcast tomorrow, which will be, Liz Storer's got another op-ed that is so chocked full of stuff that's not true, I can't even resist. So that'll be the podcast tomorrow.
I just want to say thanks for keeping the fort. It's good to be back, even though I'm a little rusty. If you're watching today, you can see I missed a few cues, but it all works out well in the end. But we need to talk a little bit about what the state treasurer brought to a number of legislators early in the week when I was gone to Laramie.
All right, well, maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow, too. So anyway, for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.